There is a victory for President Trump out of the case in New York. This is the case brought by DA Alvin Bragg. Remember, sentencing was supposed to be, was it November 19th, Will, at the actual sentencing?
November 26th is the sentencing date.
That is the sentencing date on those 34 felony counts as well as misdemeanors. And the question now is, will those felony counts survive? Will the misdemeanors survive? And the victory here is that the judge who was going to decide today on how the Supreme Court case on presidential immunity affected the case by Alvin Bragg and ultimately the verdicts in this case has now actually put a hold on that date and has moved it until November 19th. That was a request put forward by the Trump team, that Trump legal team, that ultimately the DA's team joined as well. So you had the Trump legal team say, we want a delay. We want to have more briefing on this now that he is president-elect. So add that to the mix, that during a transition is it's an actual governmental time period where you open up an office, you have resources as an incoming president and vice president to put together your team and utilize background check systems, FBI systems for people that will require clearance, all of that. So this is, even though you're president-elect, you are in an official position through the transition. So that also can affect the immunity issue out of the court. That briefing will be done. And then ultimately by the end of November, sometime right around Thanksgiving, we should have a final decision by Judge Merchan. And I would say at this point, things are looking better and better for President Trump each day with this delay, because now they're going to be considering another issue that the judge has with trying to go forward with any kind of sentencing, because we're now in a official transition period.
And this stay of the decision whether or not to dismiss the case because of the Supreme Court decision on immunity was granted by Judge Merchan, and he has requested that the people, so the state of New York, DA Bragg's office, file with the court off calendar your view of appropriate steps going forward. And that filing is no later than 10 a.m. on November 19th. So next Tuesday, they have a week to get this brief in. But I want to read you this from the request from DA Bragg's office when they were joining the Trump team to grant this stay on the immunity decision, because all of their briefing was in the context of the election hadn't happened yet. So everyone now wants to say, look, now there are extenuating circumstances. But this line makes you think that the DA is trying to decide how to proceed very carefully. The people agree that these are unprecedented circumstances and that the arguments raised by defense counsel in correspondence to the people on Friday require careful consideration to ensure that any further steps in this proceeding appropriately balance the competing interests of, one, a jury verdict of guilt following a trial that has a presumption of regularity, and two, the office of the president. They understand these are large constitutional ramifications.
I could foresee this case simply going away, but the case really starts, and the problems start, with judicial malpractice by Judge Merchan. He allowed into evidence, contested evidence, with respect to Donald Trump's core presidential powers, and that particular decision came into full relief after the Supreme Court's decision in the U.S. versus Trump case, basically disallowing or providing constitutional immunity to presidents for core official acts and limited or presumptive immunity with respect to other official acts. So Judge Merchan decided to allow into evidence, and the jurors heard this, and therefore they reached their verdict on the basis of contested evidence. And so I think a constitutional lawyer would argue that this case ought to disappear. Now, that's a tough decision. It implicates both the judge and the prosecution in this case, but even the prosecutor's office believes that there is indeed a basis for at least staying sentencing, staying the verdict, and perhaps avoiding the case. But I think at the end of the day, the judge might decide simply to defer any judgment until 2028, 2029, after President Trump has served his full 4-year term.
There is a law, just so people know, there is the Presidential Transition Act of 1963, and that makes it very clear that this is an official act of the president-elect. This is an official part of the government that is acting right now to go forward and vet these candidates and ultimately announce your cabinet and then go through the process of those who have to be confirmed, others who will be advisors.
In the peaceful transfer of power, which the left has tried to bring up so many times, that isn't just on Inauguration Day or the certification day in the Congress. This begins now because there are national security briefings that are happening for the president-elect. There are security buildup. There are working with the GAO to start setting up offices and how that runs. And many times it's not someone who has been a president before. Only once in our history has it been someone who's actually been the president before that wasn't just continuing on.
Even though he has a lot of his team will still be new, like a new group of folks.
Exactly. So there's a lot of even instruction in learning about how to operate the executive branch that has to go on. And what the concern, and I know that Judge Merchan is weighing this, and the DA even, of, hey, if we step into this right now, this could have real implications on even national security. If for some reason we try to go maximum penalty or even a slight penalty, say throw him in jail for 36 hours, that really has implications on the United States. I think what the legal pundits on all the news media are getting paid overtime today because of the uniqueness of what is going on with this. But there's across the board really many options that the judge could weigh here. Could he, as Harry Hutchison said, freeze the case entirely for 4 years and let this dangle over the president's head until he's 83 years old and then say, you're out of office now, let's go ahead and move forward with sentencing? I think that would have big trouble on appeal for the district attorney's office, who may not even be the district attorney anymore at that point. But then you also have to think about, could he say, we're going to do a fine, get this out, and still enter the judgment? Or does he throw it out entirely? There are many people that even brought up the left is loving to call him a convicted felon. However, yes, the jury did render a guilty verdict. That judgment hasn't been entered in until Judge Merchan enters that in with the sentencing. So there's a lot of different areas here that could completely change the narrative of this. What it all boils down to me, Jordan, is their lawfare is coming to an end.